Welcome to The Latest Version. I'm your host, Betsy Bush. We're living longer, not just growing older, and we're pushing back against the expectations that we're finished at 50 or 60 or beyond. What do you still want to do? Is it follow artistic passions, start a business, or pivot to something completely unexpected? I'm talking to people who are sharing their insights and advice for others on the path to reinvention. So, what's your latest version? Melissa Davey retired from a lengthy corporate career at the end of 2015 to pursue her second act and her dream of becoming a filmmaker. She's a great guest for the latest version because she has just the kind of story my listener wants to hear. She made her dream of being a filmmaker a reality when she completed her film Beyond 60. It's a feature-length documentary about women over the age of 60 who have lived remarkable lives and have really interesting stories to share with the rest of us. Melissa Davey, welcome to the latest version.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I am really astonished at how good Beyond 60 is. And I say this as someone who went to NYU Film School, which was my first undergraduate degree, in the graduating in the early 80s. And I know it's not an easy thing. It looks easy, but it's not. But you decided to pursue film after a lengthy career in, I would say, management. How would you describe what you were doing?
Yeah, all of my career, both in the nonprofit world and then later in the for-profit world, was related in senior management. I was either developing programs and running operations and managing them throughout the country, all related to disability and the insurance market.
It sounds, I can see a lot of people going, wow, I don't think I would last 22 years or however long it was at your corporate job. But to go from something like that to a very creative field, what was that about? Was there always something inside you that said, I need to bust out and do something different? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, my life took many circuitous routes, and it was, because I had these jobs for long periods of time, doesn't mean that I wasn't doing other things on the side. And I was always so curious, about people's stories. And at work, the customers that I had, the staff that I hired, I was always listening to their stories, interested in their stories. And I think that's sort of what led me down the path of wanting to do film. I've always been in love with film, but it was this creative piece that wasn't quite being satisfied in building, marketing, and operating businesses for people. I mean, that in itself was wonderful, and I had a wonderful run. But there was something eating at me, and it really didn't hit me until I got a lot older. So as you said in the intro, I was 65 when I decided to leave. And, I was one of the lucky women in senior management who was in a company that really took no notice that I was of a certain age. I could have stayed there for another 5-10 years as long as I wanted to, and as long as my creativity within the business world was, still on top. But there was something eating at me. And I really believe it was looking at the clock and realizing one day that I was 65 at the time. And you know how you get on these trains in life, mm-hmm. and you're just going fast and everything's happening and you're growing your family, you're taking care of things, you're enjoying your work. And you stop one day and you look and you realize that, here I am, 65. Do I really want to do this? Mm-hmm. And a few things happened to make me really sit down and question that. And one was that our company was being bought out again by private equity. And I'd been on that train before. Mm-hmm. We'd been through that a few times. And I knew that they would require me to make a significant investment again of 5 years. And that's when I started saying, okay, I'm 65. That means I would be 70. Do I still want to be at this desk? Mm-hmm. And I always had a joke at work with my senior management team that I didn't want to die at my desk. Mm-hmm. And it was said, tongue in cheek, but I really did mean that. I didn't feel that this was my last hurrah. And it started to worry me a little bit, when I sat there doing inventory of all the things that I hadn't done, of all the things that interested me. Like you have a leg up on me. You went to film school. I didn't do that. But all the time that I was working, I was interested in film. I was reading about how films are made. I was watching every film that I could. And I always had this little nagging voice saying, just do it. Go make a film. If you're that interested, why not?
Why not? That's so interesting because I've had guests who have wanted to pursue artistic careers early in their lives, in their 20s, and realized, I don't want to be a starving artist. I don't want to be struggling. I want to be financially secure. Yeah. And then at a certain point, that artistic urge really takes over, and they've reached a point where they can say, I'm going to put this prior life aside. I've done that. I've achieved a certain result. Now I want to return to my desk and write a novel or take up painting and things like that. It's a very powerful urge to create.
You're absolutely right. You are right 100% on point with how I was feeling and how so many women that I've interviewed of a certain age are feeling as well. And, there's the fear factor when you're younger. And you talked about that just a minute ago. You have this security of income and a steady job. And would you really throw all of that away to pursue something that may not bring you the same return? Yeah. Maybe it would gratify you in a different way. But financially, it's true. It is a huge risk to jump into something, on the artistic side of things. So I think sometimes it takes us years of experience and experiencing life before you can actually get through the fear to take a look at, the entire landscape and say, is this the good time to try it? Because you do have to plan. You do have to make maybe some concessions in life in order to pursue what you really want to do, but it can be done. And in my, observation, most of the people who don't make the jump, it's because of that fear. Mm. Some will clearly tell you, I can't financially do it right now. And that makes perfect sense to me. And then maybe they're making a plan to do it at a later time in their life. But most people are just afraid. And most people, if you sit with them and talk with them about it, will tell you it's too scary to make that leap to do something that I have no connection to. I have no training in. Why would I do that? So they kind of talk themselves out of it, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've interviewed someone who's written an interesting book. Michael Clinton has written a book called Roar about taking those steps to change your life after a certain point, because a lot of us, well, as you know, I think in the insurance world, we could all live to be into our 90s. A lot of us will live to be 100. Do we want to be 65? And, that's a great time to be making a pivot, because you don't want to be 95 and say, gee, I had 30 years in which to do something, and I was too scared to do it. What was I afraid of? Right. And I've wasted, a third of your life could be in retirement or whatever we want to call. I happen to hate the word retirement, but
I do too.
Yeah. What do you call it? Do you have a way to describe this phase of your life?
I haven't quite figured out anything that feels terribly comfortable. But retirement to me means you've stopped.
Yes.
You've stopped everything. I now have gotten more comfortable saying I left my job and I started a new one. And people will many times try to put me in the retirement box and say, no, you retired from your job. I'm like, no, I didn't. I actually quit so that I could pursue something new. So that there is this, false sense that people have careers and that's what counts.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they leave that career, that financially secure career, and go into something maybe artistic, that isn't as equal.
Yes, it takes on, the guise of a hobby. Oh, well, that's just a hobby. It's just a pastime. It somehow is less legitimate than what you were doing in an office.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's our culture. I mean, everything's based on what are you earning? What is it that you are doing that is bringing you, money?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a cultural thing, I think, in our society that we need to get over.
Yep.
Because I don't feel retired. And I have people asking me all the time in the grocery store. There was a woman behind the counter taking my, groceries, and she said, "Oh, are you retired?" I guess because I was there in the middle of the day and
Right.
because I look a little bit older. But I said, no, actually, I'm not retired. But today I have off and, I'm doing my grocery shopping. And it was an interesting comment, I thought, that, oh, you must be retired.
Yeah.
Because many artists don't work 9 to 5.
No, that's one of the appealing factors,
exactly.
Isn't it? One thing that Michael Clinton talks about in his book, Roar, is this idea of life layering, adding depth to your life by taking on the way you were talking about how you love filmmaking and studying film and going to films and reading about films is, I think, what Michael Clinton would call life layering. You've added these different layers to your life that have enriched your life, and then now you're able to deploy all that knowledge. Is there for you. I'd love to hear how you first got this idea that you could do film, or what were those first steps that put you on the road to being a filmmaker?
Okay. It's a little, again, circuitous routes. It's the way I do things. So I was sitting there in my desk at 65 saying, oh, gee whiz, what am I going to do? Will I sign up for another 5 years? No, I can't do that this time. And I remember talking with my boss, who was the CEO, and saying, I don't want to die at my desk. I have to quickly figure this out. I need to do something. So I did the interview, my self inventory, and really started coming up with things that, and I had quite a list.
Oh, wait. Tell me about the self-inventory. This is interesting. Was this something you had read about, or it was just something
No, it was just, it seemed natural.
Uh-huh.
It was like, it just started happening where I picked up a pen and my pad and started making a list of all the things that I wish I had done, but I hadn't done. And some were ridiculous, and some I didn't have the physical capacity to do, but I found them interesting. So I started crossing off the ones that were pie in the sky, and film just stayed there the whole time. Playing a saxophone stayed there, but I finally had to remove that because I don't read music. And I thought, well, if I don't start to learn how to read music until now, it could take me a while. Mm-hmm. But a film, I think I could figure it out immediately. I think I could start, doing it and learning it as I go, which was really how I did business. When you're young and you start creating businesses and building businesses, you you really don't have that experience of doing it. You can be taught via books and whatnot as to what you should be looking for on how to create a budget or whatever. But I didn't really have experience when I built the division of the company that I did. So I thought, well, if I could do that, why couldn't I make a film? And then a couple of things happened. So I'm just cogitating and thinking about it. And I went to a meeting in DC, a congressional meeting, which I had been to many, many, many times. And I remember sitting there thinking, this will probably be my last meeting if I leave. And then I remember thinking how awful this meeting was, because it seemed like Groundhog Day. And it hit me squarely in the face that you've been coming to these meetings with congressional people for 20 plus years, and it never changes. We don't move forward. So that day I knew I couldn't do this anymore. I did not want to do it anymore. So I went home early from that meeting after I gave my little testimony, went home early and met up with a friend. And she asked me to go with her to pick up her daughter at school and drop her off at the horse barn. And that's locally here in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So as we're driving up this dirt road on this dark and dreary, strange-looking March day, she said, I come up here every day, and I think they're making a film over there. And she pointed, and I looked, and there were, it was weird. there were lights and camera people, and I said, oh, absolutely. So we continued up the road, dropped off Grace, and came back down, and we stopped and watched. And, I took a picture of a very interesting driveway with craggly trees leading to this old farmhouse. And I said, I bet I know who it is that's filming this. And she looked at me kind of curiously, like, how the heck could you know that? And I said, M. Night Shyamalan, he lives here and he does spooky movies. And look at this set. Huh. And so I pulled out my iPhone and I pulled up his website. And up came a picture of the picture that I just took of the driveway. And it said, and I thought, oh boy. And it said, M. Night Shyamalan making a micro-budget film in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So we confirmed that it was him. And then there was this little red button on his website, and it said Charity Buzz. And I didn't know what that was at the time, so I hit it. And up came this information about his educational foundation. So I'm reading that. And then it said, win a day on the set with M. Night Shyamalan. And the proceeds that you would be betting would go to this wonderful educational foundation. So I did. I started, my girlfriend was like, you've got to do this.
Oh my gosh,
this is destiny. Do it. So I started betting against a dentist in New Jersey for a few days. And, it was starting to get a little expensive. So I went and told my husband, by the way, just FYI, I'm trying. And he said, oh, that sounds great. You would love that. And so, short story, I was the one who was chosen. I guess I gave the most money. And they chose me while I was sitting at my desk at work. I had my phone propped up because I knew they were going to be announcing. And there it was. You win a day on the set with M. Night Shyamalan.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. So within the month, I was, with him for 8+ hours, filming a scene from the visit. And when I say with him, I mean that he was so welcoming and open that he had me behind the camera with him. He had me with his crew. He asked me what I thought about how he was doing things, and he encouraged me to ask him questions. So here I was, this older woman with this young filmmaker, and I was amazed that he didn't have me sitting in a chair just watching.
That is incredible. What a story.
Yeah, I was completely enthralled. And at lunch, we sat together and he said, what do you do for work? And I tried to do the one sentence, managed care, disability insurance, representation for Social Security. And he glazed over and he looked at me and he said, "What do you really want to do?" And I quickly said, "I want your job." And he said, "You better hurry up." And this was something that he wouldn't even remember. He was being, funny. He said, "You better hurry up." I was a 65-year-old woman sitting there. And those feelings you get, kind of the feelings like you've felt this before, like the stomach drops. It was like that. It was like a ton of bricks had hit me. Mm-hmm. And I thought his simple words, "Well, you better hurry up." That did it that day. So I went home late that night, walked in the door and said to my husband, "I'm quitting my job and I'm going to make a film." And he's been with me a long time. So he just kind of nodded and said, "Okay, all right." And the next day I did. I went to the CEO and I gave a year's notice because I needed to mentor someone to take over this division that I had built. And I figured that 1 year would give me time to plan this out, decide what it was, and walk out the door already working in the film. And that's exactly how it worked.
That is incredible. So you kind of figured out that transitional moment when you leave that behind, but fortunately you had this overlap that allowed you to continue to work, do what you had to do to leave on the best of terms, everything taken care of, but at the same time, opening that door to that new life.
Yes, yeah. And by the time I left, I had actually started the film, found a production company to help me, had already done the teaser because I had done the first 3 interviews. And I had a website and I was, I walked out the door ready to go. And it made it less scary. Mm-hmm. It made it less scary because I had already spent months figuring out how I was going to do this and knowing pretty much what I wanted it to look like.
So how did you decide on the topic beyond 60? I mean, obviously you are yourself beyond 60. Yeah. So tell me how you decided that was how you were going to make your first film.
I actually figured that out that night that I came home from being with Shyalaman. I didn't sleep well that night because I had made the decision to do something big. And while I was awake, laying in bed, I was thinking about, well, what will I do? What kind of a movie? And I didn't feel that I was ready to, write a script and do something in that realm. And I thought about, well, what makes sense? And I thought, well, documentary, because I love stories and I'm good at storytelling. That was part of business as well. And that would be comfortable for me. And what would I talk about? Well, people like me, mm-hmm. Women over the age of 60 who become invisible. I mean, that had been something that I was concerned about anyway. Hearing stories about women in other businesses who were being let go early because of their age or, being ignored and not, or passed on for higher roles because they were of a certain age. And it had bothered me for years. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, all these women I know are so relevant and so interesting and have such great backstories. Why don't I just go find some women and start interviewing them and come up with some type of a documentary that would prove to people and inspire people to show them that women are still relevant and they're still doing really cool things as they get older.
Really cool things. Tell me about some of your guests, because you have a wide range of stories and abilities and talents. Some that are really intriguing. I was telling my producer today, you found the woman who voiced Siri that we And she doesn't. I don't know what we thought Siri looked like, but she's a lovely woman. But you would not think that maybe her voice was that of Siri. But how did you find her?
You know what? We connected on Twitter.
Oh,
You know, she was following. She saw something that I had written about Beyond 60, what I was trying to do, and she got in touch, and so we started to chat back and forth. And then I got on the phone with her, and I asked her after I heard her story, would you be willing to do this? And she said, sure. And she is a wonderful person. I still talk with her, Susan Bennett.
Susan Bennett. We should mention her name. Susan
Yes, she
Bennett, the
is.
voice actress. Yeah.
Yes. And she's so multifaceted. I mean, she's a musician and a singer, and she has a band. You know, she decided, she's my age. I mean, we're in our 70s, and she's decided there's no way I'm hanging it up. And if I don't have voiceover work, I'll play in the band and sing. And she's had a wonderful, interesting life, and she continues to be extremely relevant. And she tells a great story in the film about, you know, why companies use voiceover. They don't want you to see who it is. They want you to imagine who it is that you're speaking with. So it could be some young woman that you hope you're speaking with, but it's really somebody who could be much older. And it's really interesting. The voiceover world is really interesting.
Yeah.
I love Susan, and she was a great part of the film.
Truly. You also interviewed the granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker, who is, I hear more and more about her all the time. She was the first Black woman who became a millionaire. She was an entrepreneur who pioneered beauty products made for Black women, hair products, skin products, things like that. And her granddaughter wrote her biography.
Yeah, Alelia Bundles is actually her great-great-granddaughter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Right. Okay.
But Alelia is amazing. She's had an amazing career as a writer, a journalist. You know, she was working on presidential campaigns back in the 80s. She's just a fascinating woman. And she found this need to bring her great-great-grandmother's story forward because there were so many stories about her that weren't quite accurate. So she digs deep, and she's come up with several books now covering Madam C.J. Walker, which are phenomenal. Some are for young people, and some are, you know, adult versions. And it's just an amazing story. And Alelia is an amazing woman, and she is very visible these days. Not only connected to the books that she's written, but she does a lot with, you know, pursuing stories around Black history and making sure that these stories are told. And she's a wonderful woman.
I thought it was so interesting, the shot of her in the room where she keeps all the files, materials on Madam C.J. Walker. And if anyone thinks that, oh, I'm going to write a biography of so-and-so someday, take a look at her bedroom or the spare room where everything is, you know, piles and piles of milk crates filled with file folders. You know, everything, all your documentation, it took up an entire room, literally.
It did. It was literally on the bed, on the floor, up the walls. I mean, thousands of documents that she has filed away on every character in every book that she's written about Madam C.J. Walker. And I remember walking up there with her. She was laughing. We were downstairs interviewing, and she said, okay, I said, can you show me the room where you're keeping all these papers? And she hesitated for a moment. She laughed. She said, follow me. And we got up there, and we couldn't believe it. It was an amazing sight. And it is in the film. But it just does go to show you how much research she had to, years and decades of research is in that room. Amazing. And then she's taking a lot of that and now putting it into the computer, which is, you know, tedious and long hours, but
Mm-hmm.
she loves it, and she's a wonderful writer. Wonderful writer.
Just incredible. One more, all of the stories touched me, but there was one in particular. It was a woman in Pennsylvania who had a really traumatic experience as a young woman when she was abducted by someone who kept her hostage for a few days, and then the state police, found her. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, that's Peggy Bradnick Jackson, and she was abducted from the school bus. She was 16 years old in Shade Gap, Pennsylvania, which is about 3 hours plus west of me, in the center of the state, north central. Very mountainous and woodsy, and very small towns out there. And she got off the bus, and this, mentally ill man who had been in the community for a very long time, but nobody quite knew who he was, but he did odd jobs, and he was a little strange, and they knew him as Bicycle Pete. That's what they called him, because he rode a bike around town. But he abducted her at gunpoint and took her into the woods for 8 days. So it was 8 full days in this treacherous mountainous area. And he was really trying to get somewhere, and he was hoping that if he took someone who could steal a car for him and get him to where he needed to be, that, it was, the poor man was just, obviously not thinking straight.
Yeah.
But it was a torturous time for her.
Sure.
And she's lucky that she was alive at the end of it. And it became this huge manhunt. They were brought in people from all over the country to help. The FBI came in from Philadelphia. One of the FBI agents was shot by this man. This man also shot someone else during their 8 days in the woods. And, Peggy talks of thinking that she probably was going to die. And the things that happened to her shouldn't happen to any young girl.
Yeah.
But her story, finally the police kill him. She's chained to him, and they kill him. She's right near him when this happens. So she goes through this traumatic experience. And many years later, she has taken that and made it positive, in that she wants to do more to help reform mental health services to people in prisons. And, people like this poor man, she has forgiven him. Where most people wouldn't be able to find whatever it was that they had inside to be able to forgive him, she did. And she took her story forward all these decades to talk about how we need to forgive people and how we need to help people and identify people with mental illness and do more for them, as opposed to just stick them in prisons.
It's an incredibly moving story. And to have lived through that, probably have, carried this traumatic event with you, but to find forgiveness and understanding of his life story, as I think they were able to piece together, someone who did not have a loving home, who was not cared for at all, and that this is what happened. And as a result, 2 people were killed, and she also was threatened, or, her life was also in danger. That this is the cost of, how do I say it, uncared for people whose mental health is ignored by the community.
Right.
Everyone
and she
can be
says
affected.
It's not his fault. It wasn't his fault. And I don't, and I spent a couple days with her. So I don't know that I could have found I don't know, because I've never experienced anything like that, and I hope I don't. But I don't know if I could be able to say it wasn't his fault and I forgive him.
No, truly a remarkable story, and a remarkable woman, and a story that I'm glad you brought to the attention of viewers of your wonderful film, Beyond 60. Yeah. how did you find your crew? And how did you, the who did the editing? Who made those decisions? You have some interesting graphic choices that you made. I'm curious how that all came
very
together.
interesting. Well, right away, when I had made that decision that I was going to leave, I immediately started networking with people to find out who should I talk to in the Philly area that could help me. Because I knew that I needed help with camera, lights, and sound. I knew that. So I was mentoring a young woman to help her find a new job. And I was telling her that I was going to be leaving to do this. And she said, "Oh, my boyfriend is an owner of a production company in Philly. Why don't I introduce him to you and you can talk with him about what you want? He might be able to set you in a positive direction." So we met, and he had two other partners, and they fell in love with the story, and I liked them. These three young men, I mean, younger than my children. And they had something that I didn't have, and I had something they didn't have, and they were very intrigued about doing a documentary about older women. So we formed this little partnership, and off we went. So for the next almost 3 years, it took us to film all the different subjects in all the different states, to edit it, put it together. I sat with the editor because I did not have the computer editing experience, and I chose what pieces I wanted in the film, and then worked with them to come up with all the creative sides. It was a very collaborative, wonderful experience, and it gave me the tools I need to move forward to the next film.
Well, I want to know what your next film is. What's the plan now?
I am working on another film, which I hope will start filming sometime in May, and it's in Northern California. So this time, instead of interviewing 9 women, I'm going to be interviewing one woman who is also over the age of 60, who has a very, very compelling story. The backstory and the current story is very, very interesting. And if you've ever heard of the documentary Free Solo about Alex Honnold, the climber, the only person to climb El Capitan in Yosemite without ropes.
Okay.
It's his mother.
Oh, my.
And she has an extremely interesting story. So I hope to be out there. I'm working now this week to interview crews out in the Sacramento area to get that set up. And I hope to be out there in May. Now that COVID has kind of settled a bit and everybody's vaccinated, it feels a little bit like it's time to maybe venture out again.
Well, that sounds great. This has been an incredible conversation, Melissa, and I so appreciate your sharing so much of how this all came together and your process of transitioning. And I'm wondering if you have some advice to share to others who might be listening to your story and saying, I want to do something like that. What would you tell them?
Well, I think first I would say, and it sounds very basic, but it really hits home, and that is don't dismiss dreams that you have. Don't dismiss them and put them in a box and say, well, they're only a dream, because you can make dreams a reality. And you really, if you do have dreams that keep coming back over the years, they're worth looking at. And then the next one would be to work through the fear, because it's usually, the fear that's going to hold you back from pursuing anything that is new, different, and something that you feel you're not qualified, possibly, to do. That you have to really listen to your fear, work through it. Maybe that even means going and speaking with someone to help you get through that fear. Because, we all know that we've done things that we were very afraid of, but we didn't die. We came out the other end. And it felt very uncomfortable in the beginning, but we came out the other end. And we have to kind of go back to our entire life and remember all of those times we were afraid, but we made it through.
Right.
And then the last thing I think I always tell people, especially those people that I mentor, the younger people, is to take the detours in life. Always take detours, because detours can present something to you that you wouldn't see at all if you stayed on the same route all the time. There are a lot of people that are very comfortable driving the same way to work every day for 50 years. There are people who will only go to 2 restaurants because that's where they go. And it kind of keeps you in a sphere that is very limiting. So for me, it's always been, I always have taken, even when I was younger, detours all the time. And many times it has brought me to something that made me curious, made me stop, made me look, and I learned something from it. So, you know, that day I took the detour and went up the dirt road.
Right.
I would have never been on the set with M. Night Shyamalan, and he never would have said, "What do you really want to do?" You know, all of that was because of a detour that day. So I think those are the 3 things I would say.
Wow. That is, always take the detours. That is so true, because you never know what you're going to run into. Melissa Davey, I am so grateful for the time you've given us today and sharing your incredible journey. I want to make sure my listener knows how to see your film. It's streaming on, I got it on Apple Plus.
Yeah.
It's called Beyond 60.
Yes.
And anything you want to add about that?
No, you can find it. It's streaming almost everywhere right now. It's on Vimeo, Vudu, Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video. It's also on demand if you still have cable TV, and some people still do. So you can just, you know, punch in Beyond 60 and you spell it out, SIXTY, into the search bar, and boom, you'll be able to rent it there as well.
Well worth your time, and you'll be really inspired by the 9 women that Melissa talked to in the movie. And wow, what an incredible conversation we've had. Thank you so much, Melissa Davey.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for listening. You can listen to episodes on our website, thelatestversionpodcast.com, and read more about me and my guests. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It really helps the show. I'm Betsy Bush, and this is my latest version.